3, 2, 1. Hello YouTube, Otaku here. Welcome back. I'm going to be your personal narrator. We're going to be getting back into it with page 451 of The Grapes of Wrath. If you haven't been onto this channel before, please go ahead and check out the channel description before we begin to get a better idea of who and what this channel is going to be for. The next step is, if you haven't been onto this channel before, please prepare for the eucalyptus inhalation ritual. After that, we will proceed to go have a book. Where is my lighter? Toby. Your name is Toby. Anyways, so the jewels are going through their honestly, the most tragic of all things. I mean, you could sit there and say Grandma and Grandpa and Noah. You could say that all these things leading up to this are just equally as tragic. But nonetheless, that this is the most tragic of things happening at once for the family. Besides them just losing the house and getting kicked off the land, like, that itself was just rough, but now the whole family just can't even stay together. Like, it's impossible. The world is a cruel, cruel place, and even in storytelling, this is just another depiction of the reality of life. All these things were really things that were out in the world. None of this is like, I don't think there was ever a single point in this book where it was just too far-fetched. Like, honestly, nothing was truly like misplaced into the world of fictional. Everything was about as non-fictional as a made-up story could be. I'm pretty sure, like, Tom Joel, who knows, maybe in some world of reality that the Jolts were a family and they all had this happen, or maybe this is based on true story, but at the end of the day, this is all just a good, creative poem of, like, the chaos that the world ensues into these types of literature. Like, this was real life put on a blank piece of paper. That's cool. Clink, clink, clink. Let's begin. We always like to start these sessions off with little personal convos, just to get everybody. This tastes good. Just to get everybody, like, comfortable with being here. The music's live, and I'm having a good day. I hope y'all are having a good year. Please do not forget your waters as well. Once again, I have failed into my own lessons. Do as I say and not as I do. As I begin this story, please make sure to have water on standby. These sessions do get intense. Alright. He wrote them in a book, with the space left for the rights. Got your bags? I got a few. Cost you $1. And the car poured into the yard. The owner pushed his sheep-lined leather jacket up against his throat. He looked at the doorway apprehensively. This 20 isn't going to take long to pick with all these people, he said. Children were climbing into the big cotton trailer, digging their toes into the chicken wire sides. Get off them, the owner cried. Come on down, you'll tear the wire loose. And the children climbed slowly down, embarrassed and silent. The gray dawn came. I'll have you take a tar for dough. I'll have you take a tear for dew, the owner said. Change it when the sun comes out. All right, go out when you want. Light enough to see. The people moved quickly onto the cotton field and took their rows. They tied the bags to their waist, and they slapped their hands together to warm, stiff fingers they had to nimble. Blah. The dawn was colored over the eastern hills, and the wide lines moved over the rows. And from the highways, the cars still moved in and parked in the barnyard until it was full, and they parked along the road on both sides. The wind blew briskly across the field. I don't know how you all found out, the owner said. There must have been a hell of a lot of grapevines. The 20 won't last till noon. What name? Whom? How many? The line of people moved out across the field, and the strong, steady wind and blew their clothes. Their fingers blew to the spilling boils and flew to the long sacks growing heavy behind them. Paul spoke to the man in the road to his right. Back home, we might have gotten rain out of the wind like this. Seems a little mighty frosty for rain. How long you been out here? ? He kept his eyes down on his work as he spoke. His neighbor didn't look up. I've been here for nearly a year. Would you say it's gonna rain? ? Can't tell. And that ain't no insult, neither. Folks that live here ain't their lives can't tell. If the rain can get in the way of the crop, it'll rain. And that's what they say out here. Paul looked quickly onto the western hills. Big gray clouds were coasting over the ridge, riding the waves swiftly. Them look like rainheads, Paul said. His neighbor stole a squinting look. Can't tell, he said. And all down the line of rows, the people looked back at the clouds. And then they bent lower onto their work, and their hands flew to the cotton. They raced at the picking, racing against time and cotton weight, racing against the rain and against each other. Only so much cotton to pick, only so much money to be made. They came to the other side of the field and ran to get a new row, and now they faced in the wind, and they could see the high gray clouds moving over the sky towards the rising sun, and more cars parked along the roadside, and new pickers came to be checked in. The line of the people moved frantically across the field, weighed all at the end, marked their cotton, checked the weight into their own books, and ran for new rows. At 11 o'clock, the field was picked, and the owner was done. The wired side trailers were hooked on behind wired side trucks. They moved out onto the highway and drove away to the green. The cotton fluffed out through the chicken wire, and little clouds of cotton blew through the air, and rags of cotton waved onto the weeds beside the road. The pickers clustered disconsolately back onto the barnyard and stood in line to be paid off. James, 22 cents. Ralph, 30 cents. Joel, Thomas, 90 cents. Winefield, 15 cents. The money laid on the own book as he was being paid. Wainwright, Angie, 34 cents. Tobadian, 63 cents. The line moved past slowly. The families went back to their cars, silently, and they drove slowly away. Jones and Wainwright waited out the truck for the doorway to be cleared, and as they waited, the first drops of rain began to fall. Al put his hands out on the curb to feel them. Rosa Sharon sat on the middle, and Ma on the outside. The girl's eyes were harmless. Hush again. You shouldn't have came, Ma said. You didn't pick more than 10-15 pounds. Rosa Sharon looked down at her great bulging belly, and she didn't reply. She shivered suddenly. She held her head high. Ma, watching her closely, unrolled her cotton bag, spread it over Rosa Sharon's shoulders, and drove her close. At last the way was clear. Al started his motor and drove out into the highway. The big, infrequent drops of rain laced down and splattered onto the road, and as the truck moved along, the draughts became smaller and closer. Rain pounded onto the cab of the truck so loudly that it could be heard all over the pounding of the old worn motor. On the truck bed, the Wainwrights and the Jolts spread their cotton bags over their heads and shoulders. Rosa Sharon shivered violently against Ma's arm, and Ma cried, "Go faster, Al. Rosa Sharon's got to chill. Gonna have to get her on her feet in hot water." Al sped into the pounding motor, and when he came to the boxcar camp, he drove down close to the red cars. Ma was sprouting orders before they were well stopped. "Al," she commanded, "you and John and Paul go out to the Willows and collect all the dead stuff you can. We gotta keep warm. Wonder if the roof's leaked." "No, I don't think so. Be nice and dry. But we gotta have wood. Gotta keep warm. Take Ruthie and Whitefield too. They could get twigs. This here girl ain't well." Ma got out, and Rosa Sharon tried to follow, but her knees buckled and she sat down heavily on the running board. Fat Mrs. Wainwright saw her. "What's the matter? ? Her time's a-coming? ? "No, I don't think so," said Ma. "Gotta chill. Maybe took cold. Give me a hand, will you? ? The two women supported Rosa Sharon. After a few steps, her strength came back. Her legs took her weight. "I'm all right, Ma," she cried out. "It was just a minute there." The older woman kept hands on her elbows. "Feet in hot water," Ma said wisely. She helped her up to the catwalk and into the boxcar. "You rubber," Miss Wainwright said. "I'll get a fire going." She used the last of her twigs and built up a blaze in the stove. The rain poured now, scored in at the roof of the car. Whew. Right, we were at page 454. Ma looked up at it. "Thank God we got in the right roof," she said. "Them tents leak, no matter how good you put 'em up. There's just a little water that always comes through." "Mrs. Wainwright?" Rosa Sharon laid still on a mattress. She let them take off her shoes and rubbed her feet. Miss Wainwright bent over her. "You got pain? ? She demanded. "No, just feels good, just feels a little bad." "I got painkillers and salts," said Miss Wainwright. "You're welcome, and if you want 'em, perfectly welcomed." The girl shivered violently. "Cover me up, Ma. I'm cold." Ma brought out all the blankets and piled them on top of her. The rain roared down onto the roof. Now the wood gatherers returned, their arms piled high and the sticks at their hats and coats dripping. "Jesus, she's wet," Paul said. "Soak you in a minute." Ma said, "Better be back and get more. Burns up awfully quick. Be pretty dark soon." What a time to get hiccups. Sometimes you get hiccups, so you gotta hold your breath. Now that I can record for as long as I want, I can actually just sit here and smoke in peace. My friend Eli just sent me a reel. Eli's cool people. That's a pretty nice hit. Alright, let's keep it going. I'm all set. Better get back and get more. Burns up awfully quick. Be pretty dark soon. Ruthie and Winefield dripped in, and their sticks on the pile. They turned to go again. You two stay, Ma ordered. Stand up close to the fire and get dry. The afternoon was silver with rain. The roads glistened with water. Hour by hour, the cotton plants seemed to blacken and shrivel. Pa and Al and Uncle John made trip after trip to the thickets and brought back loads of dead wood. They piled up near the door until the heap was nearly reaching the ceiling, and at last they stopped and walked towards the stove. Streams of water ran through their hats to their shoulders. The edges of their coats dripped and their shoes squished as they walked. All right, now go get off them clothes, Ma said. I'll get some nice coffee for you fellas. And you got dry overalls to put on. Don't stand there. The evening came early. In the boxcars, the family bundled together, listening to the pouring water on the roof. Chapter 29, page 455. We are 19 pages away from being finished with this book. Very excited. Give or take a page, but less than 20, I like to think. If not at 20. Clink, clink, clink. They're doing what they can now. Honestly, something's bound to happen. I don't know what, but something major is gonna happen, and that's how the book's gonna end, I assume. Chapter 29, page 455. Over the high coast mountains and over the valleys. One of these chapters. Alright. Over the high coast mountains and over the valleys, the great clouds marched in from the ocean. The wind blew fiercely and silently, high in the air, and it swished in the brush, and it roared in the forest. Clouds came in brokenly, in puffs and folds and great crags. I'm gonna look up that word later. C-R-A-G-S, great crags. Surely they're not trying to say cracks and great cracks and trying to just put crags as like a twang. That'd be ridiculous. So hopefully that word will pop up in the dictionary. Alright, let's continue. The clouds came in brokenly in puffs and folds and great crags, and they piled in together and settled low over the west. And when the wind stopped and left the clouds deep and solid, the rain began with gusty showers, paused in downpours, and then gradually settled to a single tempo. Small drops at a steady beat. Rain was gray as could see through. Rain that come mid-daylight to evening. Was first the dry earth sucked the moisture down and blackened. For 2 days the earth drank the rain, until the earth was full. Then puddles formed, and in low places little lakes formed in the fields. The muddy lakes rose higher, and its steady rain whipped the shining water. At last the mountains were full, and hillsides spilled into the streams, built them to refreshings. sent them roaring down the canyons into the valleys. The rain beat on steadily, and the streams and the little rivers edged up to the bank sides and worked as willows and tree roots, bent the willows down into the currents and cut down the roots at cottonwoods and brought down the trees. The muddy water whirled along the bank sides and crept up the banks until it was last it spilled over into the fields, into the orchards, into the cotton patches where the black seams stood. Level fields took lakes, broads and gray, and the rain whipped up the surfaces. Then the water poured over to the highways and cars moved slowly, cutting the water along and leaving boiling, muddy wake behind. The earth whispered under the beat of the rain, and the streams thundered under the churning refreshments. When the first rain started and the immigrant people huddled in their tents, saying, "It'll soon be over," and asking how long it'll likely to go on, ? Page 456. And when the puddles formed, the men stood out into the rain with shovels and built little ditches around the tents, little dikes around the tents. The beating rain worked on the canvas until it penetrated and streams set in. And then the little dikes washed out and the waters came inside and the streams wet the beds and blankets. The people sat in wet clothes and sat up boxes and put planks on the boxes. And then day and night they sat on the planks. Beside the tents the old cart stood. The water foiled the ignition. Beside the tents the old cart stood. I'm going to retry that again. Water foiled the ignition wires and water foiled the carburetors. The little gray tents stood in lakes, and at last the people had to move. Then the cars wouldn't start because the wires were shortened, and if the engines would run deep and engulfed in wheels, the people waded away. I never looked up that word. It's still in the book, waiting to be looked up. I'm probably going to do it after the book is finished, more than likely. Carrying the wet blankets in their arms, they splashed along carrying the children, carrying the very old in their arms. And if a barn stood on high ground, it was filled with people, shivering and hopeless. Then some went into the relief office, and they came back sad to their own people. There's rules. You gotta be here a year before you can get relief. They say the government is going to help. They don't know when. And gradually, the greatest terror of all came along. There ain't going to be no kind of help for 3 months. In the barns, the people sat huddled together, and then the terror came over them, and their faces were gray with terror. The children cried with hunger, and then there was no food. Then the sickness came, pneumonia and measles, and they went into the eyes, and the mastroids. What are mastroids? Mastroids. And the rain fell steadily, and the water flowed over the highways, and for the culverts could not carry the water. Then, from the tents came the crowded barns. Groups of salt-in men went out, their clothes slopping rags, their shoes muddy pulp. They splashed out through the water to the towns and to the country stores, to the relief offices to beg for food, to cringe and beg for food, to beg for relief, to try to steal, to lie, and under the begging and under the cringing, a hopeless anger began to smolder. And in the little towns, pity from the sodden men changed to anger, and the anger at the hungry people changed to fear of them. Then sheriffs swore, and deputies in droves, and orders were rushed for rifles. Oh God. For tear gas, for ammunition. Then the hungry men crowded the alleys behind the stores to beg for bread, to beg for rotting vegetables, to steal when they could. Frantic men pounded on the doors of the doctors, and the doctors were busy, and the sad men left word on country stores for the connoisseurs to send a car. The connoisseurs were not too busy. The connoisseurs' wagons backed up through the mud and took out the dead, and the rain pattered relentlessly down. The streams broke their banks and spread out over the country. Huddled under sheds, lying under wet hay, the hungry and the fear bred anger. Their boys went out, not to beg, but to steal, and the men went out weakly to try to steal. The sheriff swore in new deputies and ordered new rifles, and the comfortable people inside houses felt pity at first, and then distaste, and finally hatred for the immigrant people. In the West Hay of leaking barns, babies were born to women who panted with pneumonia, and old people curled up in corners and died that way, so that the connoisseurs could not straighten them. And at night, frantic men walked boldly to hen roosts and carried off the squawking chickens, and if they were shot at, they did not run, but splashed suddenly away, and if they were hit, they sank entirely to the mud. The rain stopped. On the fields the water stood, reflecting the gray sky, and the land whispered with moving water. And the men came out from the barns, out of the sheds. They squatted on their hams and looked out over the flooded land, and they were silent, and sometimes they talked very quietly. No work till morning, no work till spring, no work. And if no work, no money, no food. Fella has a team of horses, and had to use them to plow and cultivate and mow. Wouldn't think of turning out to starve and wasn't working. Them horses were men. The women watched the men, watched to see whether the break had come at last. The women stood silently and watched, and where a number of men gathered together, the fear went. For there... Hold on, let me turn over to the next page. It's so little amount of pages, it's hard to turn. Page 458, The Grapes of Wrath. Faces and anger took its place, and the women sighed with relief, for they knew it was all right. The break had not come, and the break would never come as long as fear could not turn to wrath. Tiny points of grass came through the earth, and in a few days the hills were pale green with the beginning year. Chapter 30, page 459. I really wish I had some water right now. Let's continue. In the boxcar camp, the water stood in puddles. Honestly, I'm gonna smoke right fast. As I live and breathe, I shall continue to push on into everlasting light. we're back to The Family, chapter 30, page 459. In the boxcar camp, the water stood in puddles, and the rain splashed in the mud. Gradually, the little stream crept up the bank towards the low flat where the boxcar stood. On the second day of the rain, Al took the tarpaulin down from the middle of the car. He carried it out and spread it over the nose of the truck, and he came back into the car and sat down on his mattress. Now, without the separation, the two families and cars were one. The men sat together and their spirits were damp. Ma kept a little fire going at the stove and kept a few twigs burning. She conserved her wood. The rain poured down on the nearly flat roof of the boxcar. On the third day, the Rainwrights grew restless. "Maybe we ought to better go along," Mrs. Rainwright said, and Ma tried to keep them. "Where'd you go? And be sure of a tight roof." "I don't know, but I got a feeling we ought to be going along," they argued together, and Ma watched Al. Ruthie and Winefield tried to play for a while, and they too relapsed into sullen inactivity, and the rain drummed down onto the roof. On the third day, the sound of the stream could be heard about the drumming rain. Pa and Uncle John stood on the open door and looked out onto the rising stream. At both ends of the camp, the water ran near to the highway, but at the camp, it looped away so that the highway embankments surrounded the camp at the back and the stream closed in on the front. And Paul said, "How's it gonna look to you, John? Seems like to me if that creek comes up, she'll flood us." Uncle John opened his mouth and rubbed his bristling chin. "Yeah," he said. "Might at that." Rosa Sharon was down at the heavy cold, her face flushed and her eyes, page 460. Her eyes shined with fever. Ma sat beside her with a cup of hot milk. "Here," she said, "take this here. Got bacon grease in it for strength. Here, drink it." Rosa Sharon shook her head weakly. "I ain't hungry." Paul drew a curved line in the air with his finger. "If we was all out getting our shovels and threw up a bank, I bet we could keep her out. Only have to go up there and down there once." "Yeah," Uncle John agreed. "Might. Don't know if there was other fellas wanna. They might rather move someplace else." "But this here cars are dry," Paul insisted. "Couldn't find no dry places as good as this. You wait." For the pile of brush in the car had picked up a twig. He ran down the catwalk, splashed through the mud of the stream, and set his twig upright onto the edge of the swirling water. In a moment, he was in the back of the car. "Jesus, you get wet through," he said. Both men kept their eyes on the little twigs at the water's edge. They saw the water move slowly up against it and crept up against the bank. Paul squatted down at the doorway. "Coming up fast," he said. "I don't think we ought to go talk to the other fellas. I think we ought to go talk to the other fellas. See if they'll help ditch up. Gotta go get out of here if they won't." Paul looked down the long car at the Wainwright end. Al was with them, sitting beside Angie. Paul was next to their prescient. I felt like no, I don't think I'm prescient. Let's put that one down. P-R-E. I apologize for the long way. P-R-E-C-I-N-C-T. P-R-E-C-I-N-C-T. sitting beside Angie. Paul walked to their prescient. Water's rising, he said. How about we go throw up a bank? ? We could do her if everybody helped. Wainwright said. We was just talking. Seems like we ought to be getting out of here. Paul said. You've been around. You know there's a chance we got to be going dry to place. You know what chance we got to get a dry place to stay. I know, but just the same. Al said, Paul, if they go, I'm a-going too. Paul looked startled. You can't, Al. The truck. We ain't fit to drive that truck. I don't care. Me and Angie gotta stick together. Now you wait, Paul said. Come on over here. Wainwright and Al got to their feet and approached the door. See? ? Paul said, pointing. Just a bank for there and down there. He looked at his stick. The water swirled on about and crept up the bank. Be a lot of work that you might come on over anyways. Wainwright protested. Well, we ain't doing nothing. Might as well be working. We ain't gonna find us no nice place to live like this. Come on now. Let's get to talking to the other fellas. We can't do her if everybody helps. Al said, if Angie goes, I'm a-going too. Paul said, look, Al, if them fellas won't dig, then we'll all have to go. Come on, let's go talk to them. They hunched their shoulders and ran down the catwalk to the next car and up to the walk-in open door. All right, it's a little break at 461. Ma was at the stove, feeding at a little sticks of the feeble flame. Ruthie crowded close beside her. I'm hungry, Ruthie whined. No, you ain't, Ma says. You had good mush. Wish we had a box of Cracker Jacks. There ain't nothing to do. Ain't no fun. They'll be fun, Ma said. You just wait. Be fun pretty soon. Get a house and a place pretty soon. Wish we had a little doggy, Ruthie said. We'll have a dog and a cat too. A yellow cat? Don't bother me, Mom begged. Don't go plaguing me now. Ruthie, Rosa Sharon's sick. Just you be a good girl a while there'll be fun soon. Ruthie wandered, complaining, and walked away. From the mattress where Rosa Sharon lay covered up there came a quick, sharp cry. Cut off in the middle, Ma whirled and went to her. Rosa Sharon was holding her breath and her eyes were filled with terror. Oh, God. What is it? Ma cried. The girl expelled her breath and caught it again. Suddenly, Ma put her hand under the covers. Then she stood up. Mrs. Wainwright? She called out. Oh, Mrs. Wainwright. The fat old lady came down the car. What, me? ? Look! ! Ma pointed to Rosa Sharon's face. Her teeth were clamped onto her lower lip, and her forehead was wet with perspiration, and a shining terror came over to her eyes. I think it's coming, Ma said. It's early. The girl hailed a great sigh and relaxed. She released her lips and closed her eyes. Mrs. Wainwright bent over her. Oh, God, I'm scared. 462. The Grapes of Wrath. Did it kind of grab you over here? Quick! Open up and answer me. Rosa Sharon nodded quickly. Mrs. Wainwright turned on to Ma. Yep, she said. It's a-coming. Early, you saying? ? Maybe the fever bring it. Well, you ought to be up to on her feet. Ought to be walking around. She can't, Ma said. She ain't got the strength no more. She's been working. Well, she oughta. Mrs. Wainwright grew quiet and stern with efficiency. It'll help with the lot, she said. Come on, let's close that door. Nearly, keep out that draft. The two women pushed on the heavy sliding door and boosted up along until nearly a foot was open. It'll get our lamp too, Mrs. Wainwright said. Her face was purple with excitement. Angie, she called, you take care of them here little fellas. Ma nodded. That's right, Ruthie. You and Whitefield go down to Angie. Go on now. Why? Both of them had said unison with demand. I love these kids. 'Cause you got to. Rosa Sharon's gonna have a baby. I want to watch, Ma. Please, let me. Ruthie, you get now. You go on again. There was no argument against such a tone. Ruthie and Whitefield went reluctantly down to the car. Ma lighted the lantern. Mrs. Wainwright brought her Rosa Sharon lamp down and set it onto the floor, and its big circular flame lighted the boxcar brightly. Rosa Sharon and Whitefield stood right with the brush pile and peered over. I wish Connie was fucking here. Lit up the boxcar brightly. Ruthie and Whitefield stood behind the brush pile and peered over. Gonna have a baby and we're gonna see, Ruthie said softly. Don't you make any no noise now. Ma won't let us watch. If you look this way, you scrunch down behind the brush, then we'll see. There ain't many kids that've seen it, Whitefield whispered. There ain't no kids that's seen it. There ain't no kids that've seen it, Ruthie insisted proudly. Only us. Down by the mattress in the bright light of the lamp, Ma and Mrs. Wainwright held a conference. Their voices were raised a little over the hollow beating of the rain. Mrs. Wainwright took a paring knife from her apron pocket and slipped it under the mattress. Maybe it don't do no good, she said apologetically. Our folks already done it. Don't do no harm anyways. Ma nodded. We used a plow point. I guess anything's sharp will work. Long as you could cut the birthing pains. I hope it ain't gonna be long one. You feeling all right now? ? Rosa Sharon nodded nervously. Is it a-coming? Sure, Ma said. Gonna have a nice baby. You just gotta help us. Feel like you could get you to walking? I could try, Rosa Sharon said. That's a good girl, Mrs. Wainwright said. That is a good girl. We'll help you, honey. We'll walk with you. They helped her to her feet and pinned a blanket over her shoulders. Whew. Then Ma held her arms from one side and Mrs. Wainwright from the other. They walked her to the brush pile and turned slowly and walked her back, over and over. The rain drummed deep onto the roof. Ruthie and Whitefield watched anxiously. Where's she going to have it? Whitefield demanded. Shh, don't draw in. We won't be let in to look. Angie joined them from behind the brush pile. Angie's lean face and yellow hair showed in the lamplight, with her nose so long and sharp in the shadow of her head onto the wall. Ruthie whispered, You ever saw a baby be born? ? Sure, said Angie. Well, when's she gonna have it? ? Oh, not for a long, long time. Well, how long? Maybe not before tomorrow morning. Shucks, said Ruthie. Ain't no good watching now then. Oh, look. The walking woman had stopped. Rosa Sheriff had stiffened, and she whined with pain. They laid her down and on the mattress and wiped her forehead while she groaned and clenched her fist. And Ma talked to her softly. Easy, Ma said. Gonna be all right. All right. Just grip your hands. Now then, take your lip out of your teeth. That's good. That's good. The pain passed on, then let her rest a while, and then helped her up again. And then the three walked back and forth between the panes. Paul struck his head in through the narrow opening. His hat dripped the water. "What'd you shut the door for?" ? And then he saw the walking women. Ma said, "Her time's a-coming." Page 464. I'm hopefully going to keep pushing this all the way to the end. I got 15 minutes left technically, but I don't think that's going to cover the 10 pages. I'm going to keep pushing on. Then we couldn't go on if we wanted to. No. Then we'll have to build the bank. You got to. Paul sloshed through the road, mud of the stream, his marking stick 4 inches deep. 20 men stood in the rain, and Paul cried, "We got a builder. My girl got her pains." The men gathered around him. "Baby? ? Yeah, we can't go now." The tall man said, "It ain't our baby. We can go." "Sure," Paul said. "You can go. Go on. Nobody's stopping you. There's only 8 shovels." He hurried to the lowest part of the bank and drove his shovel into the mud. The shovelful lifted with a sucking sound. He drove it again and drew the mud into the low plight of the stream bank. And beside him, the other men ranged themselves. They heaped the mud up in low embankments. And those who had no shovels cut live willow whips and wove them into a mat and kicked them into the bank. Over the men came with the fury of work, a fury of battle. When one man dropped his shovel, another took it up. They had shed their coats and hats. Their shirts and trousers clung tightly to their bodies. I would have just gone naked. It's the middle of the dark, like, who cares? We're trying to build something 4 inches deep. You know how long that's going to take? The men stopped, listened uneasily, and then plugged their work again. And the little levee of earth extended until its little levee. I'm going to look up that word too. Levee. Of earth extended until it connected with the highway of embankment on either end. They were tired now, and the shovels moved more slowly, and the streams rose slowly, and it edged above a place where the first dirt had been thrown. Paul laughed in triumph. "She'll come over if we haven't built her up," he cried. The stream rose slowly up into the side of the new wall and tore at the willow mat. "Higher!" Paul cried. "We got to get her higher." The evening came and the work went on, and now the men were beyond weariness. Their faces were set and dead. They worked jerkingly and like machines. When it was dark and the women set lanterns on the car doors and kept pots of coffee handy, and the women ran one by one to the jolted car and wedged themselves inside. The pains were coming close now, 20 minutes apart, and Rosa Sharon had lost her restraint. She screamed fearlessly under the fierce pains, and the neighbor women looked at her and parted her gently and backed away at their own cars. Men, Ma had a good fire going now, and all her utensils, filled with water, sat on the stove to heat. Every little while Paul looked at the closed door, the car door. "All right? ? He asked. "Yeah, I think so," Ma assured him. As it grew dark, somebody brought out a flashlight to work by. Uncle John plugged on, throwing mud on top of the wall. "You can take it easy," Paul said. "You'll kill yourself." "I can't help it. I can't stand that yelling. It's like when..." "I know," Paul said. "But just take it easy." Uncle John bluttered. "I'll run away. By God, I gotta work or I'll just run away." Paul turned from him. How'd she stand on the last marker? Question mark. The man from the flashlight drew the beam with the stick. The rain cut widely through the light. Coming up. She'll come up slower now, Paul said. Got to flood pretty far to the other side. She'll come up, though. The water filled the coffee pots and set them out again. And as the night went on, the men moved slower and slower, and they lifted their heavy feet like dragged horses. More mud on the levee. More willows interlaced. The rain fell steadily, and when the flashlight turned on faces, the eyes showed staring and the muscles on the cheeks were welted out. For a long time, the screams continued from the car, and at last they were still. Paul said, Maud'll call me if it was born. He went on shoveling at the mud sullenly. The stream eddied and boiled against the bank. Then, from up the stream, there came a ripping crash. The beam of the flashlight showed a great cottonwood toppling. The men stood to watch. The branches of the tree sank into the water and edged around with the current, with the steam dug out from the little roots. Slowly, the tree was freed, and slow it edged down the stream. The wearied men watched, their mouths hanging open. The tree moved slowly down. Holy shit, a tree fucking fell? Did it kill somebody? No, I don't think it killed anyone. Then a branch came on a stump, snagged and held, and very slowly the roots swung around and hooked themselves on the new embankment. The water piled up behind. The trees moved and more of the bank and tore at the bank. A little stream slipped through. Paul threw himself forward and jammed mud in the bank. The water piled against the tree, and then the bank washed quickly down, washed around his ankles, around his knees. The men broke and ran, and the current whirled smoothly into the flat, under the cars, under the automobiles. Holy shit. Uncle John saw the water break through the murk. He could see it. Uncontrollably, his weight pushed him down. He went to his knees, and the tugging water swirled above his chest. Paul saw him go. Hey, what's the matter? He lifted him to his feet. You sick? Come on, the cars is high. Uncle John gathered his strength. I don't know, he said apologetically. Legs giving out. Just giving out. Paul helped him along towards the cars. When the dike swept out, Al turned and ran. His feet moved heavily. The water was about his calves. And when he reached the truck, he flung the tarpaulin off the nose and jumped into the car. He stepped on the starter. The engine turned over and over, and then there was... Hi, Dad. Hold on, Papa. Smoke. This is awful. This is like nature finally just wiping the people clean. Like, hey, if you ain't fucking protecting this kind of weather, you're done. You're dead. Something's about to happen. I'm scared. Mother Nature's not scared. She's just doing her job. Patreon. Page 466. The engine turned over and over, and then there was no bark of the motor. He choked the engine deeply. The battery turned the soldering motor more and more slowly, and then there was no cough. Over and over, slower and slower. Owl set of the spark high. He fell under the seat of the crank and jumped out. The water was higher than the running board. He ran to the front end. Crankcase was underwater now. Frantically, he fixed the crank and twisted around and around, and he clenched hand onto the crank, splashed in the slowly flowing water of each turn. And then his frenzy gave out. The motor was full of water. The battery fouled by now. Oh, God. On slightly higher ground, 2 cars were started and their lights on. They floundered in the mud and dug their wheels until finally the drivers cut off the motors and sat still, looking into the highlight beams, and the rain whipped white streaks through the lights. Al went slowly across the truck and reached in and turned off the ignition. When Paul reached the catwalk, he found the lower end floating. He stepped it down onto the mud and underwater. "Think you can make her all right, John?" he asked. "I'll be all right. Just go on," Uncle John said. Okay, we got about 3 more minutes. Page 467. No, we can just call it here. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that was that was a lot to take in. That was I wish Tom was here, because now Tom leaving doesn't even matter. This is just like, this might just be their grave. I wish Tom was here. He might know what to do. Grapes of Wrath. Y'all take care. Gang gang.